Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
All right. So, let's change this now. Let's continue the discussion that we started yesterday. The discussion that we had yesterday was not really directly anything to do with Krishna consciousness, but discussing various principles of knowledge, epistemology, in modern atheistic or secular worldviews. Now, these kind of discussions can go on for days and days and not come to any conclusion. By the way, that's already stated in Shastra. Tarka apratishta. Simply by discussion, we can't come to any conclusion. And actually, although in Vedic culture philosophical discussion is central in ascertaining Siddhanta, we'll find in the whole tradition, there's always lots of discussion between various schools of Vedic scholars. And then within the Vedic schools, there is also discussion. Just like the whole discussion between Advaitavadis and Vaishnavas, that's all within one school. That's all within the 6 schools of Vedic knowledge. That's all within the Vedanta school. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally discussed with Advaitavadis. But it's not been emphasized so much within Gauriya Vaishnavism that we try and discuss and try to come to a conclusion. Although it is there, but it's not been a principal part of our culture as it has been, especially in the 3 sampradayas. These 3 sampradayas, they're considered to be, by scholars, to be very philosophical, because they do a lot of, at least traditionally, they used to do a lot of debating. There's 3 Vedanta sampradayas, namely the Kevaladvaita of Shankara, the Vishishtadvaita of Ramanuja, and the Shuddha Dvaita, or simply known as Dvaita, of Sri Madhvacharya. So, these discussions can go on and on and on and on and on and on, and in fact, we're talking about Vedanta discussions, and they actually go on generation after generation. You'll find that Shankaracharya, he wrote something, then different followers interpreted it in different ways, different opponents opposed it in different ways, and then to answer the opposition, this is going on over generations, to answer the opposition, someone else comes up with another modification of the theory, and it goes on like this, generation after generation. So this kind of discussion does not in and of itself establish Krishna consciousness. But it may challenge the suppositions of people who are not in Krishna consciousness, and it can help to reinforce the understanding of persons who are in Krishna consciousness. This is all on the mental platform. The spiritual platform is one of direct experience of the personality of Godhead. On that platform there's no more well, maybe, if, but, therefore, because. These are all left far behind. But for us who are very much on the mental platform, actually the term mental platform in Srila Prabhupada's books is always used in a defaming way, what's the word? Deprecating way. That term is used there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Manoratha. This term comes up several times. On the vehicle of the mind, moving along on the mind. So this is considered the mundane platform, not a solid platform. But actually, as long as we're not in full Krishna consciousness, we also conceive of Krishna in terms of the mind. And just as this body is used, it's a vehicle for serving Krishna. Actually, Krishna can be served by the spiritual body, but we can begin to serve Krishna with this body. We can make garlands for Krishna. We can offer arati to Krishna. We can sing for Krishna, all using this body. So in the same way, the mind can be used. The mind and the intelligence have to be focused on Krishna. And with the mind and intelligence, we have to rise above the platform of the mundane mind and the mundane intelligence. So this is discussed by Krishna Bhagavan in Bhagavad Gita, how the mind, the bodies and the senses are the sitting places of lust, and we have to use the mind and the intelligence knowing oneself to be superior to the mind and intelligence. That means, knowing oneself means taking the help of the mind and intelligence. One has to know oneself to be the mind and the intelligence, above the mind and intelligence, to rise above it. Anyway, getting back to something of yesterday's discussion. I never did ask you. I just presumed. I should have asked you. Do you think that this is another diary from yesterday? I mean, the possibility of one diary coming into being without any design is very remote. But if you say there are two with different designs, that makes it even that more remote. But just for the sake of clarification, do you, taking the role of a secular scientist, do you think that without any intelligent input, purpose or design, this entity could come into being?
No.
No. It requires intelligent purpose and design. Now, you gave the example of the rainbow, something that is complex, and it comes into being by what you presume to be random interactions of matter.
Yeah, sort of.
What appear to be random interactions of matter. Although our whole thesis is that everything's under control. But starting from the point of not seeing God, or not seeing any controller, starting from the point of utilizing our senses and intelligence, it appears to be random. So you say that's an example of something complex that comes into being randomly. In reply to that, I would say that although certainly a rainbow is spectacular, I may be wrong, but I'm just repeating what on the basis of what I learned at school in my physics class. A rainbow may not be that complex compared to this diary. It's a fraction of light. It's not very complex. It doesn't serve any particular purpose, as far as we know.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't think it is an interesting example, but I don't think it's a sufficient example.
I just want to ask you one thing.
Okay. But wait a minute. What about about that rainbow thing? Are you still,
This is
still
this
on
is,
that?
This
Okay.
is, this is it. The point is that you are trying to relate complexity with intelligence.
Yeah.
But there's a flaw in this argument.
There is a flaw.
Yeah, there's a flaw in this very argument because complexities are of two types. One is spontaneous complexity and one is designed complexity.
Could you give me an example of spontaneous complexity?
I'm giving it.
Design complexity, this is an example.
So we accept it as intelligent design.
Yeah.
But spontaneous complexity, for example, everybody knows snowflakes. It is not only complexity, but it is a unique symmetrical complexity, which is called as fractals. Not only symmetrical, but there are infinite symmetrical patterns within that snowflake, infinitely regressing. So it is symmetrical, it is complex, and it is spontaneously coming everywhere, every time.
According to
anywhere.
what we perceive.
I mean to say...
Yeah, okay, that's accepted.
Yeah. So
we would say that it's not random, but that's a different epistemology.
Yeah, of course. So
all right, go on.
So not only snowflakes, there are many things like, for example, crystals, spirals. It is unique, it is symmetrical, it is spontaneous. And like this, if you see entire universe, there are many things which are spontaneous complexity, and this spontaneity in the complexity, that we take as a regard that it is not intelligent design.
Okay. But these examples you give of apparently spontaneously produced complexity, none of them seem to serve any particular purpose.
No, that's okay. That's besides the point. If you artificially make something, that makes that is you are designing something with a purpose.
With a purpose, yeah.
That's different thing. But in entire universe, we see spontaneous complexity.
Okay. Well, that brings us to all right. Well, that brings us to another question then. That in that case, you say that everything that we perceive as existence, it has no particular purpose.
Yeah, at least what we perceive in universe. And
it has no particular purpose.
Yeah, of course, because it is spontaneous.
Okay. Well, that brings me to another question that came up yesterday. Then, where and how does spontaneously a sense of purpose arise?
That is... Well, we are coming to a different question, but first we should deal with this question.
Okay. If I accept the premise that you have said, that you have raised now, where does the sense of purpose arise from? Spontaneously. Why does a certain pattern of chemical combinations, which we call human beings, bacteria, they act in a purposeful manner. They have a sense of purpose. They act in a manner that they try to, the particular matrix which we call a human body, acts in a way that it wants to perpetuate its existence and perpetuate its offspring also. Where does that come from?
Well, okay, fine. So that spontaneity in living beings, as you say.
No, I don't call it spontaneity. I'm asking, how do you...
Sense of purpose.
Yeah, sense of
Okay,
purpose.
fine. So that's coming... see, first of all, sense of purpose is again, as we see, it is produced in every living being, everywhere. That's first point. So it is at least accepted that it is spontaneous in everything. Now, the point is, how it comes is by evolution. Because evolution keeps those things which survive. And the desire to survive is that will survive.
But why does stone not have that? And a human being has
Stone
it?
is non-living, and that is stone. If you ask about matter and living things, this is what you're asking.
Yeah.
Difference between non-living and living things. Well, according to us, stone and all chemicals, they're not so evolved. But
so a stone at some time could evolve into a human being?
Yeah, that's what is modern evolutionary theory. There are
stones can evolve into human beings.
At the bottom of the sea, we have molecules, clay molecules, which interact, and slowly they...
Okay, this body is made up of molecules, the chemicals in which at some point in time could have been in a stone.
Yeah,
that's
of
a
course.
But where in the chemicals does... You say by evolution the matter has a sense to survive. But why?
No, why means, for example, we have millions of parallel
well,
universes.
If it's all chemicals, then what? Why?
No, this question, like according to string theory, or maybe some common sense if you apply, there are millions and billions of universes. At least you also accept this. There are millions of universes.
You say there are millions and billions of universes. You say that?
Yeah, we scientists, according to string theory, there are many parallel universes. Now we know.
That's a theory.
Yeah, but okay, fine. No.
That's your theory.
No, so even if you don't accept this theory, let's take it as a thought experiment. Let us take it as a thought experiment.
As a hypothesis,
as
to put
hypothesis.
it simply. Yeah.
So if there are millions of universes.
Okay,
Suppose. Now there are so many chemicals in all the universes. Now these chemicals interact, and out of those interactions, in one of the universe, where this desire to survive evolves, now this kind of desire will itself
But wait a minute, where did the desire come from in the first place? Because we don't see that chemicals have desire.
No, that's what I was explaining you yesterday. There's a new branch of science, chaos theory.
What's it called?
Chaos.
Chaos theory. Yeah.
No, I mean to say there's nothing to laugh, because people, you don't know, you're like fools, so that's what. Chaos theory doesn't mean that we are in chaos. Chaos theory means the phenomena which looks chaotic has an understanding beneath physical laws of working. It may seem chaotic to person.
It has an understanding.
Yeah. It has some laws. It has some laws, physical laws working beneath it.
That means that there's some conscious factor within there.
No, physical laws.
Physical laws.
Yeah, physical laws, gravity, electromagnetic.
But again, the factor of purpose comes in there. Why laws?
No, now. Yeah, now the point is...
Why laws?
Now this...
It all points toward... To me as a layman, it all points towards purpose, consciousness, independent of matter.
No, that's your supposition.
You have a supposition also, and that that it all comes into being by evolution. So it's my supposition against your supposition.
Okay, fine. That's okay. But we have not seen anything going for a purpose, specifically for a purpose.
We see everything.
In living things, we try.
Yeah, I mean, this book was made with a purpose.
Yeah. This book I gave you example previously. This is a different thing.
And and the pen.
Yeah,
and
that's
the microphone stand and the microphone. And
yeah, but pen, microphone, and book doesn't spontaneously generate everywhere and anywhere.
Exactly. That's the point I'm making.
So
that the whole universe is not just coming into being spontaneously without any direction.
But I told you examples like snowflakes. It is spontaneous.
Yeah.
So,
but this isn't.
So, yeah, this isn't. But just now you told everything is not coming out of spontaneity, but we see many examples which are coming out of spontaneity.
Yeah, but
so
whenever there's purpose, when it has a specific purpose like this, then it's designed with a certain purpose.
That's okay. So
not just by spontaneous combination.
We accept it is designed by purpose. We accept.
Yeah.
Now, for example, I'll give you one example. In 2011, we had a supernova explosion recorded. NGC 2006 supernova explosion. Now, the point is, supernova is a galaxy which collapses on its own gravity and then explodes.
According to your theory, you can't actually be sure of that.
Well, we can see telescopes. It's not a big
You
thing.
can see in telescopes,
fine.
You don't know exactly what's going on or why it's going on. You can say it collapses according to gravity, but you can't prove that. That's just your supposition.
Yeah. Information, data, mathematical analysis proves that it is collapsing.
Proves that it collapses.
It shows at least. Shows. Otherwise, how? Your whole argument is not tenable. Otherwise, how do you understand the universe?
Well, the thing is, you're expecting me to accept your example on the things that you tell me, but I don't know.
No, but it's simple.
I mean, I don't even know if this law of gravity, it's just what you call, from the little I've studied in science, it seems to be a bit of a big supposition. Like this, there's not enough gravity in the... It's supposed to be that the different bodies, by the attraction they exert, but there's not enough matter in the universe. So all this unseen matter had to be invented or supposed.
No, but it's not due to... but the point you're making is not due to the fact that there is...
Sorry?
The point you're making now is not due to the fact that that there is no concept of gravity.
There is a concept of gravity, but I'm saying that it's maybe not as established as mainstream scientists would have us believe.
No. Due to gravity, we are speculating that there is dark matter.
Yeah, and I'm saying that the theory of gravity itself is questionable.
Why? If you throw a ball, it comes down.
Yeah, so.
Then
but that doesn't mean that it's because of why you say it falls down.
Well,
I can also say that, the whole universe is existing because Vishnu enters into everything and keeps everything in place. I can also say...
Yeah, you can say that. But the point
and you may say that's not scientific.
Yeah, but the point
it's another... From our point of view, it's another hypothesis.
No, but my point is, science believes in causal relationships.
Science believes in causal relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a belief system.
No, it's a fact, but we speak
it's
like
a fact,
this.
you speak like that.
Yeah, we
okay,
we
Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's a fact.
So, I mean to say just a linguistic thing. So, we accept that, that all causal relationships are reality. What I mean is, there are
a lot of problems, What do you mean by reality?
First I have to complete my thing, otherwise how we can...
What's that?
I mean to say, you have to allow me to speak, otherwise how we can...
Well,
discuss?
in this kind of discussion, you really have to start at the basics, because if we're gonna have any discussion, we have to have some shared axioms. Otherwise, we can't even discuss.
So for that we have to make a dictionary then, you mean to say, or what?
Well,
Otherwise how do you discuss?
well, yes, we can start at the beginning. Just like scientists often speak about proof. But what is the nature of proof?
Yeah, that's...
We have to, and scientists say, well, we don't accept anything on faith. But philosophically speaking, it would seem that faith is required in everything. Just like you would say, scientists have proved that, well, you don't need a scientist to prove this, but sugar is sweet. That's so simple that you don't need a scientist to prove it. But there's no way that I know for sure that my experience of sweetness when I put sugar on my tongue is the same as your experience. When I see the color blue and you see the same object which is colored blue, there's no guarantee that I see the same thing as you do. And actually, according to your science, a lot of creatures are colorblind.
Yeah, they are. You are talking about problem of qualia.
Of
qualia.
Qualia?
Yeah, this is the problem of qualia in psychology.
Qualia?
Qualia, qualia.
I'm not familiar with that word.
Yeah, this is the word which is precisely mentioning your argument that every person perceives same color. Maybe he might be perceiving it differently.
Yeah.
Same red color.
And we don't even know, if you want to be, if you want to take doubt to an extreme, we don't even know if anything exists at all. Even myself. So philosophically speaking, we have to start, if we're going to have any discussion of anything, we have to start with some shared axioms. Is it not? So even science, it rests on some axiomatic beliefs which are unprovable.
Like?
For instance, that the world is real, that it can be studied, and there are certain phenomena which can be explained by scientific study.
No, but word is real. It's common sense. It is real.
Well, common sense, philosophically,
no,
it's questionable.
Philosophy is long divorced from science.
Well, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that is problem, and that may be good or that may be bad, whatever. Because this kind of philosophy, solipsism, which you are bringing, that kind of thing are long out, I mean to say.
No, but my point is that science, although it may say that it's divorced from philosophy, it's also based on faith.
That's what I'm asking you. What is the example for that?
It's based on faith. Well, it's based on faith that the world is real. It's based on, which is not provable. Science is all about proof, right? But you have to start with some axioms which are unprovable. That's there in science also. I mean, most people would accept that the world is real.
Yeah, science
but philosophically speaking, it's not provable.
Yeah,
you can't prove it.
Yeah, you can't prove it. Philosophically, you can't.
Philosophically, you can't prove it, but you just have to accept. So my point is that, just starting at the beginning here, you have to. There are certain. Although we say science is based on proof, Although I don't know, in a lot of modern science, if they even agree with that, but at least at the school level, we talk about proof. But that's based on certain shared axioms which we all accept. But it could also be said that those axioms are shared because we culturally accept them as axioms. For instance, if you're raised in a culture in which you believe that rain falls because the rain god sends it, then as far as you're concerned, the rain falls because the rain god sends it. And there wouldn't be any need of, in your mind, there wouldn't be any need of science to explain that.
Well, these kind of things, Galileo and Newton, they condemn these kind of questions because they stop scientific advancement, and we are entangled in this stupid, basic questions: what is real or not?
Is that a stupid question? I guess to a scientist, what is real and what is not, it's a very important question.
To a hardcore
but they that's called materialism. You just reject such questions, and you only accept as real that which we can smell, touch, taste, feel, smell, and conceive of.
Well, Newton wrote a book, Principia Mathematica, we know. In that book, Newton mentions that because of these questions, because of this philosophical baggage which we have been carrying since 2000 years, we couldn't advance in scientific.
Well, again, advance, that's a very subjective term.
These words I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. He told, so we couldn't really analyze matter because we were discussing all these questions. So now let us analyze matter and its laws, and that's how we got science.
Well, that's interesting. If you just put your Keshvananda Das cap back on again. The Vedic culture has advanced science along with philosophy. Then we get into another discussion, that's another. But it is an important discussion, actually. I mean, here you've brought up a point which is at the very basis of the whole modern Western civilization. Well, you could say probably there are two bases of modern Western civilization which don't sit very well together. One is Christianity, and the other is Enlightenment thinking. So, at the basis of Enlightenment thinking is the concept that theistic thinking or non-analytical thinking has impaired the progress of human understanding. Whereas we find in the Vedic, this is actually a very important point, which should be brought into the Western world, and it's probably the reason why there has been and is up to the present day tremendous propaganda in the Western world and within India itself by people trained by Western people that they always want to show that everything Indian is useless and stupid. And the reason they do that, they don't do that so much about Chinese culture or Arabic culture or any such thing, because they know, or some people in the 19th century discovered, there's actually a very advanced civilization, and that they had long before gone far deeper into these philosophical questions than the Western people even now can even imagine. And not only that, but they also had advanced science side by side. It's not that the science was divorced from religion. for want of a better term. The term religion is actually not a very good term to apply to the Vedic ethos. The English term religion implies sectarianism, but there's no word in the Sanskrit language which fits the term religion, because the whole conception is more broad, and it's all interlinked also. It's not that Gyan, Vigyan, Dharma, that these all things are separated.
Yeah, by the way, today's seminar I'm going to talk about this very point.
This is a very important point. I was just mentioning to you yesterday that recently in America, in Connecticut, which is it's a small state in which there's Yale University, and it's right next door to Massachusetts, in which there's Harvard University. So these are the two principal, well, there also there's Princeton, but generally Yale and Harvard are considered the prime educational institutions in America. And so recently in Connecticut, there was a school shooting in which a bunch of children were killed. So there was a worldwide discussion of this. I mean, when there's a bomb attack in India and 20 people die, it comes in the paper, but not so much. When it comes in America, it becomes a big thing, because America is considered the most important country in the world, and in many ways is at the present time. So about 3 days after that, there was a gang rape in a bus in Delhi. And the whole world news media focused in on that, and focused in, and focused in, and focused in, and they kept on focusing it, and they completely dropped the whole issue of the Connecticut shooting, which was actually much worse in terms of number of people killed. And so I suggested, when we were discussing this, there's the typical kind of thing that the world media does to try and cover up America's deficiencies, and to show that it's very civilized, and to always try to show that India is very uncivilized. And this whole pattern is nothing new. It's been analyzed in some detail in the book Breaking India by Rajiv Malhotra, and what's the other one? The other writer, I can't remember his name. Aravind Neelakanta, who came to our program in Guruvayur about 2 years ago, was it? So he analyzed in some detail how especially the English medium journalists in India, they're given scholarships to go and study in the West. Then they become the best, and they get the best jobs. And a very interesting point, for instance, if there's a riot in America, it's presented as an aberration. That means actually American people are very civilized, so if there's a riot, it's just something unusual. It's just very strange. But if there's a riot in India or Africa, it's like, well, that's just normal. What do you expect with those people? They're uncivilized. That's the kind of attitude. So it's actually an obstacle in presenting Krishna consciousness, because Krishna consciousness is based on the Vedic culture. And it's very prominent in the West. People speak to... I sometimes say to people, they ask me, where are you from? And I say, well, I'm born in England, but I've lived in India most of the time. They say, India, caste system, burning women. And it's like they think that every woman is being burned. She's in high risk of being burned. I saw some statistic that, they're talking about all the rapes in India, which are not good. But I saw a statistic that there's a rape every 2 minutes in America, where the population is much less. Someone is... Anyway, it's a big discussion, but it is a major problem in presenting Krishna consciousness. That people think that anything from India is backward and stupid. So that's an important thing we have to do. Is to establish that Vedic culture, it had all this knowledge. Actually, the whole of modern science is based on, or they want to base it all on mathematics. But there couldn't be any mathematics in the Western world if it wasn't for zero, which came from India. They had these Roman numerals. You can't think mathematics with Roman numerals because they don't have a zero. And it becomes extremely cumbersome once the numbers get beyond... Well, even the number 58, you already need... No, 48, you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 digits for 48. And you can't work with it theoretically. 1, 2.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
6 digits, yeah. Or is it 5?
No, it's 6.
1,
6.
6, okay. I got it right the first time. Yes, 6. So, those... to distinguish what are called Roman numerals from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, in the Western world, they call 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 Arabic numerals. Arabic, not Indian. So the fact that there was in India advanced geometry, astronomy, trigonometry, language, the whole science of linguistics came up when the British came to India and they discovered that there is a whole science. They had no idea, they had no concept of a science of linguistics. It came when they saw that in India there is a science of linguistics. And then it was adopted in the Western world, and then they made up the theory of a prototype Indo-Aryan language, which is a total speculation. What else? So many things. Metallurgy. So many things. Any area. A lot of it is lost now. But there is advanced science in India. It's not that they want to say that the only science is in the West. It's just developed since Newton. But many of the things which, and even not only in India, I mean, they're all over the world. There are living monuments of advanced technology which are not explainable in terms of modern technology. For instance, the pyramids of Egypt. According to modern theories, the kind of technology that should have been extant in Egypt at the period that they think the pyramids were built, they shouldn't have been able to build them. How did they build? And many such structures all over the world, like Stonehenge in England, they show advanced astronomical knowledge. The structures, ancient structures, are built in such a way that, for instance, at the summer equinox, at dawn, the sun will shine exactly on the central plinth or whatever. So all over the world there are signs of advanced civilization in the past. But orthodox, this is another very important point. If we're to orthodox science and orthodox academia routinely, ritually, religiously, if you want to use that term, ignores or rubbishes all the considerable evidence which points to advanced scientific knowledge in ancient civilizations. They just ignore it. And if anyone tries to bring it up, they just, oh, you're stupid. And if you're an archaeologist and you discover such a thing and you want to publish it, don't do it. You lose your job. So all these, I mean, it's not only members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness that are aware of this. There are people all over the world who are aware of this. In fact, our own unfortunately, our movement has become a religion. We present ourselves as a religious group. But Srila Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness as a philosophical, scientific, and cultural movement for the re-spiritualization of the entire world. He didn't like the word religion to be used in relationship to Krishna consciousness because of all the baggage that goes with the word religion. And people think, oh, it's a religion. You see, there's this religion, that religion. It's just a belief system that due to some misplaced genes, people believe in all these silly things. But Srila Prabhupada wanted to present Krishna consciousness on a philosophical and scientific basis, which means actually that science, as it stands now, has to be challenged. And it is highly challengeable on this point. And Siddhartha Prabhu and Drutakama Prabhu made a start in accumulating evidence acquired by secular scientists without any agenda without any religious agenda, evidence acquired by secular scientists that points to the existence of intelligent man many millions of years ago, which goes against the whole modern scientific worldview. And there are many, many such things. There are all kinds of things which modern science just ignores, because if you control the universities and what is called knowledge in human society is what the established orthodoxy wants you to believe. That's what's called knowledge. And although within science certain things are demonstrable and may be called science, there are also many things which they don't want you to know. For instance, there have been several reported sightings of dinosaurs in the modern age. How about that? When Srila Prabhupada was asked about dinosaurs going extinct, he didn't accept that. He didn't accept that any species are extinct. I once in Heathrow Airport in London, I met a young man who came up to me and asked what I was doing. Well, he thought it was funny that I had a laptop computer. In those days, a laptop was a bit of a luxury item. So he asked me, how come you're supposed to be religious? How come you have a laptop computer? I said, I'm using it for what you would call religious purposes. I'm using it in the service of God. And that struck him like So he asked me where I'm going, and I asked him where he is going. He said, I'm going to Africa to look for dinosaurs. as a child, or as a teenager, I guess about the age of 14 or 15, it struck me that the education which I was avoiding at school, somehow I just didn't like it. I couldn't explain why exactly. Well, it wasn't out of any high philosophical motive. I just hated it, that's all. And I thought there were much better things to do than sit in a classroom all day. But I did like to read, and the very fact that all over the world, as I understood from my reading, there are reported incidences throughout time of ghosts made me think that ghosts are a real phenomenon. And even in the modern age, I remember reading in the Reader's Digest about the writer went to a haunted pub and spent the night in a haunted pub in Wickham, which is just a short drive from where I lived. And they explained the experience, that in the middle of the night this ghost came and this and that. So it's going on. And there's a famous incident of one Delta Airlines flight. This was about 30 years ago? You remember that one? Delta Airlines flight from Miami to somewhere in South America. I can't remember exactly which. Of course, this came... I'm just giving this as an example, although I read it after I joined this movement. The Delta Airlines flight from Miami in USA to somewhere in South America. I can't remember exactly where. Which crashed. The flight crashed, and many people were killed, if not all of them. Generally when planes crash, everyone is killed. I met a person on a plane once who was... Anyway, that's another story altogether. I don't want to too much out. So, Delta Airlines, they continued flying on that route. Because the plane had crashed didn't mean they stopped flying on that route. It was a commercially viable route to fly on. But after some time, the members of their staff refused to fly on that route because there's a whole book written about it, which you used to see in the airports. It was a bestseller called Flight 307 or some Delta Flight 307 or something like that, explaining the whole thing. And I flipped open the book once and had a quick look. You can often get this gist of a book just by seeing the table of contents and the introduction and the conclusion. So, the staff refused to fly because, for instance, while they're all sitting in the plane wanting to take off, there would come an announcement over the PA system, but the captain didn't make the announcement. And the cabin crew would say that, well, isn't it a bit early? You're making a takeoff announcement. It's a bit early. So I didn't make any announcement. And then one time the hostess saw the Delta airline staff member sitting in the cabin, which is a common thing. They fly their staff from one place. They fly the pilots from one place to another, and the pilot flies the plane back. So then seeing the Delta Airlines, and they have shows he's the captain with the uniform. So he said, "Oh, sir, I didn't know you were on this flight. Is there anything you want me to get you?" And he said, "Yeah, get me whiskey or something." So she went back and then to get the whiskey, and she came, and he wasn't there. And the announcement would come, and they reckon, "Hey, that sounds just like yeah, but he died in that flight, didn't he?" And then the hostess was getting the whiskey in the whiskey store, and she saw all of a sudden the captain standing, and then she recognized him because she had flown with him before, but then she thought, well, he died in that flight, didn't he? In other words, the flight was haunted by the captain who died. That whole flight was haunted by the captain who died, and they had to stop flying it because their staff wouldn't fly. This is a modern day ghost story. So as a kid, I understood that there must be, ghosts are real phenomena. There's so much talk about it and evidence of it, but science doesn't accept it. That means that they are biased within their own worldview. That it's not actually science. There are certain phenomena which they do not want to accept or understand due to their actually non-objective outlook. Similarly, dragons. There are descriptions of dragons in every culture all over the world. And if you're a good Christian, you should believe in dragons also, because St. George of England, I don't know how he became St. George of England, because he never lived in England, but he became famous for killing a dragon. Nowadays they say he's mythological, because how could he have killed a dragon when there aren't any dragons? But whatever they call a dragon, it seemed to me when I was a kid that must have existed, because otherwise there are descriptions of them in cultures all over the world. If these cultures grew up separately, how could they all imagine the same thing? So as a child, it struck me that there are many phenomena which modern science doesn't want to touch and wants to just tell us it doesn't exist. Whereas there is a lot of circumstantial evidence that it does exist. And in Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, which I read, he gave his explanation of ghosts. It was pathetic. He said that when I was a child, I was lying down in my room at night and I saw some light moving and I was afraid it's a ghost. And then I got up and went toward it, and I could see that it was the moon. I can't remember exactly. It was some light, moonlight, or the light from the neon light, which was on the curtains, which were moving, and therefore it appeared to be moving. But that doesn't. The fact that he saw some light and he thought it was a ghost and it wasn't, does not nullify the tremendous body of circumstantial evidence all over the world since time immemorial up to the present age, that were even Delta Airlines, which they don't cancel flights very easily if it's getting money, but they had to. No one went to the Delta Airlines staff and told them, hey, there's a ghost, but they perceived it. They all reported phenomena of seeing what, according to other phenomena, would appear to be a ghost. So that just, as a child, I came to that understanding that there are many phenomena which people who call themselves scientists, they dogmatically do not want to touch at all. So this is being exposed, but it's all, and even by scientists, it's called alternative science. Even scientists themselves, not about ghosts, but all kinds of theories that are held to be true in science. Many theories are contested by scientists themselves. Just like I thought that myself. I give myself the credit, super soul inspired, of thinking that this dark matter is just a big speculation. But then I saw a video where scientists themselves were saying it's all speculation, and they don't. There's no. It doesn't exist. Qualified scientists who are not in the mainstream as saying it doesn't exist. So, science, we can say, at some level it can demonstrate some things, but at many levels it is a belief system.
Actually, one point I have to make, that all these ghost stuff and all these things, there are no case control studies as of yet.
There are no case control studies.
Yeah.
Okay. There is, let's move to another subject, reincarnation. Dr. Ian Stevenson spent his whole life in a very scientific way studying cases of reincarnation. And if there were cases reported, cases which, of course, you can't, in the purely scientific sense, prove reincarnation. But he spent his life studying cases which strongly point toward the phenomenon of reincarnation. And he rejected, if there was any possibility of cheating or what's that word? I can't remember. Where you just imagine something to be true and...
hallucinations?
No, not hallucination. You fill up the gaps in your memory with... You imagine something... It's used in psychology. I can't remember the term. Confabulation. Confabulation. So he made, and he found throughout his life, and he documented it in very scientific terms, hundreds of cases which point to the probability of reincarnation. For instance, someone is born in one village and they refuse to eat food in the family they're born because they think, I'm not eating food from you, you're too low caste. And then they're told to clean their plate after they eat. I'm not going to clean it. Come on, in my family we have servants, and a young child is speaking like this. Or you find someone who speaks in a language which they don't know, where no one in an defunct, what's that word? Non-extant dialect. I mean, there are many, many cases which are done. They're performed in a manner which is specifically meant to fit all the criteria of objective scientific inquiry, and it's ignored and rejected by the scientific orthodoxy. So,
well, there's a point.
That is a case of one phenomenon which has a person with all the scientific qualifications spent his whole life doing this and amassed a large body of evidence which strongly points toward reincarnation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an Atma, or it doesn't necessarily back up the Bhagavad Gita description of reincarnation, but it doesn't give an explanation of reincarnation, nor does it in and of itself make a religious statement. But it does strongly point to the continuation of consciousness from one body, which is continued in another birth. Now, there could be in fact, I saw something recently in which a scientist said that, it could be that there's an electrical mass which survives a programmed electrical mass which detaches from the brain at the time of death, and then that gets attached to another body. So he was trying to give us a theoretical scientific explanation of reincarnation. But I'm just making the point here that I'm not aware of any case studies of ghosts, but I am aware of reincarnation. But it's not, even though it's breakthrough research. It's in as much as no one ever did such research before. It's conducted according to all the parameters required for objective scientific research. It demonstrates, for want of any better explanation, it demonstrates a phenomenon which has been widely accepted in human culture throughout the centuries, but it is rejected and ignored by the scientific mainstream. So that points to bias.
No, but there's a point in this. I also read that book. But it's not a case control study in of itself, because...
Well, you can't have a case control study.
Yeah, that's the point. And that is why Orthodox...
But you can't have what they call a case control study, because the very phenomenon militates against that. But that's also true of Big Bang, for instance.
That's fine enough. I mean to say.
That's fine. That's fine. But reincarnation isn't fine.
You can't formulate it in mathematical rules and all this.
But why should it be formulable in mathematical rules?
Because mathematics is a language which can be understood and repeatable by everybody anywhere if they understand this language, English language.
Yeah, but why do you presume that everything is mathematically explainable? That's again, it's a convention which is accepted by scientists, but there's no. It's just what's the word? A priori assumption.
No, it's not, because a priori assumption is based on the fact that you assume something before you are making the statement.
Yeah.
But here it's not like that, because throughout history, science is based on mathematical language. We make laws according to maths, and then we go in real world and we find the same thing there as it is. For example, quantum physics standard model was first of all formulated in mathematical language.
Mathematically,
and then we went there and it's there. So all this experience proves that, shows us, confirms.
Yes, well, according to the mainstream science, yes, it's there, but there may be problems with that also. But why? Yeah, okay, so there are certain phenomena that you can, according to your satisfaction, explain in mathematical terms. Why do you presume that all of reality, all that is to be known, all that exists, has to be explainable by mathematical terms?
That can be debatable, but the one point of...
Yeah, that's I'm debating. I'm asking you the question.
Now the point is here that when we see in the macro world, up there, and when we go into micro world and at our level, wherever we see, mathematics is a tool which has helped us to predict and
certain things. You can't predict whether have you ever eaten durian? Has anyone ever ate durian? It's a fruit which is very popular in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand. You never ate a durian?
We have heard that.
Is it predictable if you'll like it or not? Probably you won't. Most people, when they eat it the first time, don't like it. What about a mangosteen? You ever had a mangosteen? I've seen them in India now. Mangosteen. It's a Jewish mango. You have to know what Jews are to get that joke. It's a type of fruit. Mangosteen. Rambutan. These are all Malay names. Durian, mangosteen. What was the other one I can't remember. So these are fruits which you get in Malaysia. And they start to import them here now also. So is it predictable if someone will like that or not?
No, this is a completely different issue. Why you have
yes, it's a completely different issue. That's the point. That there are phenomena which are not mathematically predictable, which are within the realm of human experience. So that's my point, that not everything is mathematically predictable or mathematically explainable. That's an example.
Mathematics and science is dealing with causal relationships, as I told you. It's not dealing with these kind of phenomena which do not have causal relationships.
So you admit that there is much of reality which science cannot explain. That you're admitting that there is much of reality which science cannot even begin to explain.
Like consciousness, yeah, fine. We are researching on that, and we cannot explain it as yet fully. But we are doing research. But it doesn't mean that there's God. That you are trying to bring in picture.
No, you just made a big jump there.
No, that you
made a big jump. This point about reincarnation. There is also causal relationship there. And in the soft sciences, they also deal with causal relationships which can't be mathematically explained.
No, by causal relationships, what do you mean here?
Just like, for instance, in social science, anthropology,
kind of things,
psychology.
No, in hardcore science, causal relationship, it's a different meaning. Those kind of things which you're talking, that's a different meaning there.
But you're only saying that you limit it to what can be explained in mathematical terms.
Yes, so
but there is also cause and effect, just like it's a common thing. He punched him he said something to that person, and in response the other person punched him in the face. So is cause and effect. It's everywhere. It's not just in what you can study in hard science. So that I would like to say is a defect in the scientific worldview, that if you want to actually bring science and make a worldview out of it, actually make a philosophical statement out of it, that it's going outside the realm of the jurisdiction of science. No, because there are many phenomena which are not explainable in terms of mathematical cause and effect.
No, these kind of examples which you're giving, cause and effect, this is entirely different, because what we are talking here is, if I push a ball, it will go forward.
Yeah.
That's force on a ball, cause and effect. Now they are linked. Anybody, anywhere in the world, you apply a force, ball moves. Now this kind of thing, I'm slapping somebody and that's...
You're supposed to tell me, right? Okay, I have to take a break here, medicine break.
Okay.
Bhadri Narayan Prabhu told me, just shortly after Sadarputta Prabhu passed away, he told us one incident where Sadarputta Prabhu was lecturing in a university in San Diego, and all the students were there, and then a professor came. And the professor stood up and said, well, actually, you're talking this, but the latest research says this, and this. And then Sadarputta said, yeah, but even after that, there's even more research which says this, and this. And the physics professor said, I got to go to the toilet. And he never came back. So I have to take a medicine break, but I'm coming back. In the meantime, you can chant Hare Krishna, and he might become a devotee in the meantime. These discussions are interesting. There may be no end to them. By such discussions, we're unlikely to convince the convinced scientists. Generally, these kinds of discussions, they are meant for people who are not convinced, who are influenced, whether we're discussing with scientists or we're discussing with people of some religious affiliation who want, just like for instance there are certain religious groups who want to convert Hindus into Muslims and Christians. So if we discuss with such persons, we don't expect them to come to our side. Or there may be people who are convinced that the Absolute is impersonal and Krishna is also a manifestation of the impersonal. So in such discussions with people who are convinced, we're not likely to change their way of thinking. And many people, if we discuss with them, they have a general opinion that science is the superior way to, or is the way to understand the world, or Christianity is the way to understand the world. Many people, they believe this, but they don't have much knowledge, and so many times when dealing with such people, devotees, they have superior knowledge even of the knowledge system or belief system. The devotees themselves may have more knowledge of that than the persons who subscribe to it. There may be also people who are very learned in their and equipped, philosophically equipped to defend their knowledge system or belief system. But in all such discussions, our aim is not to show ourselves as being more knowledgeable or better, but to, one thing is to defend among the public the dignity of the parampara in which we are dedicated. And for people who are maybe convinced about something which we want to bring them from and into Krishna consciousness. They may be convinced, but they never really thought about it. And so they may be, you can start to move them. And there may be others who are just neutral. And it may be also that there are assumptions about Krishna consciousness that we ourselves have made that also need to be tested. That may be there also. We can also learn from such discussions that maybe we ourselves just have blind faith, which we need to situate on a solid premise. So such discussions are useful for this, although there is no end to it. Such discussions as we are having now could go on for days and nights and not come to any conclusion. So then you may say, well, is Krishna consciousness not a fact? And we say, yes, it is a fact. But if you can't come to a conclusion, but that we can't come to a conclusion means that people may go on arguing. And the fact is that in Krishna consciousness, we do accept, what is our a priori assumption, our main a priori assumption in Krishna consciousness? What is that? Any suggestions? Basic faith. Yeah, well, that's another way of saying a priori assumption. What is our basic faith? Speak a little loudly. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No, I wouldn't say that. We're not this body. No, I wouldn't say that either.
I think
we can't understand anything by our own endeavor. No, I'm looking for something else. Shastra. That's, you got it right. Shastra. Ved. Ved is knowledge. So that's the basic assumption. That which is beyond Brahm Pramad Vipralipsa Karana Patav. That which is beyond mistakes, illusion, cheating, and imperfect senses. That is Vedic knowledge. So that is our assumption. And everything else, I mean, from the philosophical standpoint, that is our basis. That also has to be, when you enter the world of discussion, and that also should be backed up. So some years ago, Gokul Chandra Prabhu started some research on Pramana Tattva, epistemology. Why do we accept what we accept? And he thought he'd just make a seminar on the basic, the Pratyaksha, Anuman, and Shabda. But then he discovered he'd entered into a whole universe which he could spend his whole life. You could actually spend your whole life just on epistemology and never get out of it. So you have to move, if you're going to move forward, you have to, everyone has to have some assumptions. You can't live for a moment without making assumptions, and you can't gain any knowledge without making some assumptions. You have to accept, first of all, that there is such a thing as knowledge, that it is valuable, that it is valid. So, the world of philosophy, it's a very big world. And of course, preaching is not only about philosophy. This verse, which at the beginning of this session, I quoted the first words of it. Tarka apratishta. Merely by discussion and logical analysis, nothing can be established. Why is that? According to science, you can establish things. But there's always a different viewpoint. There's always some variable. There's always another way of looking at it and thinking about it. And that itself rests on various axioms. Solipsism, or doubting everything except maybe your own existence, that can't be disproved. But no philosopher accepts it, because you can't have any philosophy. It's just the end of it. It stops, it shoots dead. As soon as philosophy pops its head up, it just shoots it down. Then there's no philosophy. There's no philosophy, there's no education, there's no intercommunication between human beings. It just kills everything. So it's just a priori without solipsism. shoot it down. Just, it cannot be allowed. And it's also quite reasonable, if you want to use that word, to reject it. But you can't disprove it. So, what was I going to say? So, philosophy is so Tarka Apratishta, which is also in Vedanta Sutra. Shrutiyo Vibhinna. Now, our basic premise is that we accept Shruti, Vedic knowledge. But in this statement from Mahabharata, which is also within the Shruti as accepted, although it's not traditionally included within Shruti itself, it's also included as part of the Veda. So it says that the Shrutis, or the statements of Shastra, they are varied. The Shastra says different things. Now that statement itself is also questionable, because we have within the Shruti itself, what is that? Sarva Veda Yat Padam Amananti. What is that? Did I get that right?
Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam.
No, Sarva, I think I left out a word, but Sarva Veda Yat Padam Amananti means that all the Vedas, they speak of one thing. But apparently within the Vedas there are different statements. And that is, and then we're coming to the point. Some Shrutis, they praise Indra supreme, Varuna supreme, Agneya supreme, and so on. Shrutiyo vibhinna. Na savrishe yasya matang na bhinnam. And if we're going to talk about philosophy, then you have to have a different opinion, otherwise you're not a recognized philosopher. So, nothing can be established simply by argument. The Shrutis say different things, which suggests that they're not authoritative. And all the philosophers are busy making up different philosophies all the time. So the question that's being answered is, how can we understand dharma? This verse is from the Yaksha Prashna section of Mahabharata. So Yudhishthira is answering, how can we understand dharma? Dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. The understanding of dharma is to be found within the guha, which means a hole or a cave, or it can mean the heart. So this Ganguly, who translated Mahabharata from Sanskrit to English around I believe it was the late 19th century, he translated that the truth of dharma is found in the caves. Go and dig up. Send an archaeological team to dig up the truth of dharma. Maybe he meant that you find a yogi in a cave. I don't know. But a better explanation is that it is to be found within the heart, specifically Mahajano Yena Gata Sapanta. The path to understand that is the path on which the Mahajans have gone. Which then again, which comes to the point that one has to understand the truth of dharma from a Mahajan, a great personality. And actually the great personalities in Vedic culture, they present the teachings of Shastra. Shastra is the evidence, but that has to be understood because through great personalities. Otherwise, it might, the statements of Shastra might appear to be jumbled and not harmonious. So the acharyas, or the various philosophers, they take some certain statements from Shastra, try to establish them as the definitive statements of Shastra, and harmonize everything else in accord with that. So then, the question is then, who do you accept as a Mahajan? So in the purport, this verse appears in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, following Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that for the demons, Ravana and Hiranyakashipu are Mahajanas. For the, he goes through the Vedic philosophies. For the followers of Karma Mimamsa, then Jaimini, he is a Mahajan. And then he says, for modern scientists, Einstein is a Mahajan. So, how do we understand? It's a very important subject. How do we, we're dedicating our life in Krishna consciousness on what principle? Followers of Srila Prabhupada, especially his direct disciples, when they came to Krishna consciousness, not that they all had big debates about philosophy, but for most of them, it was philosophical. It's not that they were not philosophical, but it's not that they studied all the Vedic literature and then came to Krishna consciousness. Definitely most of them were philosophically minded at some level. It's also experiential. I know myself, when I first came to ISKCON temple at Bhaktivedanta Manor in England, I had thought that, if anyone can convince me philosophically that something is correct, I'll follow it, because I know what I'm doing. I don't really know what I'm doing now, but it doesn't seem to make any sense, and nothing that I say anyone else does seems to make any sense. So if someone can convince me philosophically, then I should follow that. But when I walked into the manor, I saw many happy, genuinely happy people, which I'd never seen genuinely happy people before, and it struck me. And just walking in the door, the smell of incense is also very, of course, in India you take that as normal, but it's not a very common thing in the West. And that smell of incense, that also struck me as being something very wonderful. Then I walked in and I saw all these paintings of Krishna, and experientially that affected me. And then when the devotees spoke to me, and then the prasadam was also that's also a major factor in many devotees coming to Krishna consciousness, because we'd never tasted anything so amazingly tasty. It just, food of a quality was just unimagined. So, but I wasn't going to join the Hare Krishna movement on that basis. I wanted some philosophical understanding also. So that came also. But that also came from people, right? They're sub-Mahajans. But for many devotees who joined and had similar experiences, the factor that really convinced them and the factor that caused them to dedicate themselves to the extent that they did, with philosophy, yes, the experience of Krishna consciousness, yes, but the overwhelming factor was the personality of Srila Prabhupada himself. That there is a person who is, although it's not scientifically quantifiable, but a person who is practically, palpably in touch with God. Now, of course, Richard Dawkins wouldn't have had that experience if he met Prabhupada. Probably wouldn't, because he's already closed his way of thinking to that. He's closed his intellectually and emotionally. He has closed himself to the possibility of there being any God whatsoever. And the very fact that Richard Dawkins writes books and goes all over the world promoting atheism, it's not just an intellectual activity. It is an emotional activity, isn't it? He emotionally wants to see people saved from the cheating of religion, which is, we also want to. But he has come to the conclusion that there is no such thing as a spiritual experience. So, preaching means there must be philosophy, there must be prasadam, there must be beautiful temples. Devotees also. We can't imitate Srila Prabhupada, but we're supposed to represent him. So, one reason why ISKCON has a good name in India is because devotees are known to follow some principles. That's one major reason. And in the Western countries also, at least in America, which is in some important ways culturally different to many other countries in the Western world, many people, those who know about our movement, which most of them don't nowadays, they did in the 1970s, many of them think of it as spiritual. In their own way, there's some respect there. So all these are different factors, not by philosophy alone. Philosophy is important. It is very important. Srila Prabhupada spoke philosophy literally day and night. Literally. He went on speaking philosophy. So it is important. But it's not by philosophy alone that we can convince people. In fact, in one sense, there's nothing we can do to convince people at all. As Gopinath Acharya said to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when they're having a philosophical discussion. And Gopinath said, well, ultimately it's the mercy of the Lord that you can understand Him. And then Sarvabhauma said, well, what's the evidence that you've got the mercy of God and I don't? And Gopinath said, the evidence is because I know Him and you don't. It doesn't sound like a very good philosophical point that Gopinath made, but later on, Sarvabhauma came to accept it himself when he himself got the mercy. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also opened up Sarvabhauma's consciousness to accept the philosophy that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was speaking. He defeated him philosophically. That's another factor, that because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was discussing with Mayavadis, but they had a basis to discuss on. The basis was Shastra and the rules of discussion. But in the modern world, there's no basis, there are no rules. It makes preaching very difficult. And people are very much conditioned by their way of thinking. So they think that, well, being nice is the most important thing, tolerating everyone else. Not that we should know the truth, but just spiritual means you just accept everyone and you just tolerate what everyone does. It's very shallow, actually. So these are some points. Hare Krishna.